The scream tore through the stillness of dawn, a sound so raw that even the crows stopped mid-flight. In that instant, the sleepy town of Alder Creek awoke to a nightmare that would stain its history forever. They said it came from the woods, where mist clung to the trees like secrets too heavy to share. By the time the sheriff arrived, only silence remained and footprints far too large to belong to any human. No one knew then that this would mark the beginning of a story written in fear, blood, and impossible truth. For most of her life, Clara Monroe had thought the forest behind her father's cabin was beautiful. The way sunlight danced through the pines, how the wind whispered secrets through the leaves. It always felt alive, almost protective. But that morning, standing barefoot on the porch with her hands trembling, Clara saw that same forest as something else entirely, a thing that could watch and remember and hide monsters within its breath. Her father, Daniel Monroe, wasn't answering. His hunting rifle leaned by the door, untouched. The coffee pot still steamed on the stove. Only the smell of iron, sharp, metallic, unmistakable, hung in the air. She called his name again, her voice cracking as it echoed into the trees. No answer. The sheriff's deputy found the tracks first. Huge, heavy, deep in the mud. They circled the cabin, then vanished into the tree line. Bear, he muttered, kneeling by one of the prints. But even he didn't sound convinced. A big one. Maybe too big. Inside, nothing looked forced or broken. The windows were locked from within, the back door bolted. And yet Daniel was gone. No body, no struggle, just a single streak of blood leading to the open back window. The townspeople whispered their theories, the same way they always did when fear came knocking. A rogue animal, a poacher, or maybe something older. In Alder Creek, legends ran deeper than roots. That night, Clara sat in her father's chair, his flannel jacket wrapped around her like armor. The fire burned low, shadows moving along the walls in restless patterns. She tried to remember their last conversation. He'd been unusually quiet, tracing the edge of an old photograph of him and a man she didn't recognize. "Some debts never die, Clara," he'd said softly, "even when you think you've buried them." She hadn't understood what he meant then. Now, those words replayed in her head like a curse. Outside, the forest side, somewhere far off, something moved, heavy, deliberate. Clara rose, heart pounding, as the faint sound of a chain dragging across stone reached her ears. She turned toward the window, and for the briefest moment, she swore she saw eyes staring back, reflective, intelligent, almost human. Then the sound stopped. Only the whisper of the trees remained. And for the first time in her life, Clara Monroe understood that the forest she had loved all her years was not silent. It had been watching. By morning, the cabin was surrounded by officers, reporters, and curious neighbors pretending to offer help while feeding on gossip. Clara watched from the porch, her face pale but unflinching, as men in uniform trampled the soil her father once called sacred ground. They found nothing new, no body, no signs of struggle. Only those enormous tracks that began and ended without direction, as if something had appeared out of thin air and vanished the same way. "Your father ever mentioned enemies?" Sheriff Harlow asked gently, his notebook trembling in the cold wind. Clara shook her head. "He didn't have enemies. He barely talked to anyone since my mother died." Harlow sighed, closing the notebook. "Sometimes folks carry secrets heavier than they look, Miss Monroe. If you remember anything strange, you call me." But Clara did remember something strange. The night before her father disappeared, she'd woken to the sound of murmured voices, his and someone else's. She had assumed it was the radio until she heard her father say, "I told you never to come back here." Then a door slammed. Silence. After the sheriff left, Clara began searching through her father's things. The old photo he'd been holding sat on the desk. Two young men, smiling with arms around each other, one clearly her father, the other his brother. The back of the photo read, "Daniel and Elias, 1989. She froze. Her father had never once mentioned having a brother. The discovery led her deeper into his study, to a locked drawer she'd never been allowed to open. Inside were old newspaper clippings, local trainer's bear escapes, traveling show, man mauled in forest, body never found, and a faded flyer with the name Elias Monroe's Miracle Menagerie, printed in bold. The image below made Clara's blood run cold. A man smiling proudly beside a towering black bear, its eyes hollow and distant. She felt the walls closing in around her. The words from the sheriff, "Any enemies?" echoed in her mind. What if her father's past wasn't as clean as she believed? What if the creature that took him wasn't a stranger at all? That evening, the forest grew restless. Crows gathered along the fence, crying warnings that scraped the sky. Clara stepped outside, clutching her father's hunting rifle, though her hands shook so badly she could barely hold it steady. The mist had rolled in again, thick and white, swallowing the trees one by one. From somewhere beyond the pines came a low, guttural growl. It wasn't the call of any bear she'd ever heard. It carried something else beneath it. Pain, memory, recognition. Clara whispered into the mist, her voice breaking. "Elias, is that you?" Only the wind answered, but it carried the sound of heavy footsteps retreating into the dark, leaving behind a single, unmistakable truth. Whatever haunted these woods had once known her father. And now it knew her too. For the next 2 days, Clara barely slept. Every sound from the woods sent her heart lurching. The house creaked differently now, as if aware of something moving just beyond its walls. At night, she swore she heard breathing, deep, measured, patient, coming from outside her window. But when she looked, there was only the fog, curling against the glass like ghostly fingers. The townspeople began avoiding her. Whispers followed her wherever she went. "Poor girl lost her father," they said. "Probably losing her mind, too." Even Sheriff Harlow had stopped calling. Whatever mystery had taken Daniel Monroe, Alder Creek had already buried it under rumor and silence. But Clara couldn't. She felt something unfinished, a thread of truth pulling her deeper into her father's past. Late one night, while sorting through his old ledgers, she found an envelope marked simply, "Do not open, Elias." Inside was a single letter, written in trembling ink. "Daniel, if you're reading this, it means you've kept your promise to stay away from me. I can't blame you for hating me after what happened with the show. I thought I could control it, but you were right. The bear wasn't an act. It was a weapon I made. And when it turned on me, I should have died that night. But it didn't kill me. It followed me, like it remembered whose blood made it suffer. I've lived with its eyes in the dark for years. It's learning again, watching, waiting. If it ever comes for you, don't run. It knows your scent. Elias." Clara dropped the paper, her pulse hammering. A trained bear? One that remembered? Her father had been right. Some debts never die. She spent the next day researching every article from the clippings. One name kept appearing: Elias Monroe, animal trainer. His traveling circus had ended in tragedy 2 decades ago after a bear attack killed 3 workers. Elias had disappeared soon after, presumed dead. But now, Clara wasn't so sure. That night, the rain fell hard. The forest thrashed under wind like something alive. Clara sat near the window, rifle in hand, staring into the dark when headlights cut through the storm. A pickup truck stopped at the gate. A man stepped out, tall, gaunt, with a face carved by years and eyes that looked almost sorry. "Clara," he said, voice graveled. "You look just like your mother." She froze. "Who are you?" He hesitated, water dripping from his coat. "Elias. Your uncle." Her grip tightened on the rifle. "You're supposed to be dead." "Maybe I should have been," he muttered, stepping closer. "But I came to warn you. It's back." Before she could respond, a deafening crash erupted from the tree line. The ground seemed to shake. Elias turned sharply, fear flashing across his face, the kind of fear that only comes from knowing exactly what's out there. The thing that stepped from the woods was massive, its silhouette outlined by lightning. Its fur glistened with rain, its breath steaming in the cold. The bear, but not like any wild animal she'd ever seen. There was an intelligence in its movements, a focus. And when its eyes met Elias's, It let out a sound that was less a roar and more a growl of recognition. Elias raised his hands. "Easy, Max. It's me." The bear stopped for a moment, studying him. Clara's chest tightened at the name, Max. The same one written across the old flyer from her father's drawer. Then everything happened at once. The bear charged. Elias shouted a command, low and urgent, but the animal didn't obey. It struck him, sending him sprawling against the side of the truck. Clara screamed, firing the rifle. The sound shattered the night, but the bullet only grazed the creature's shoulder. It turned toward her, and in that instant, she saw something terrifyingly human flicker in its eyes. Pain, confusion, almost sadness. Then it was gone, melting back into the forest as if swallowed whole by the rain. Clara ran to Elias, who was gasping, his coat torn and blood seeping through his side. "I thought it forgot me," he whispered, "but it remembers everything, the cage, the pain, the chains." He gripped her wrist with surprising strength. "Your father tried to protect you. He kept me away because he knew if I came back, it would follow." "Why?" she cried. "Why would it come after him?" "After me?" Elias looked toward the woods, his breath shallow. "Because it doesn't hunt for food anymore. It hunts for memory. It hunts what made it suffer." Lightning split the sky, illuminating the blood-smeared earth. Elias coughed, eyes distant. "You have to finish what your father couldn't. Burn the den, end this." Clara tried to speak, but he was already fading, whispering his final words. "Don't run, Clara. It'll always find you." Outside, the storm howled, but through the wind and thunder, she could still hear it, the dragging sound of a chain somewhere in the forest getting closer. The storm raged without mercy. Wind tore through the trees, bending them like they were bowing to something unseen. Inside the cabin, Clara moved quickly, her mind spinning between panic and purpose. Elias's blood trailed across the wooden floor, dark streaks leading to the couch where she had tried to stop the bleeding. But he was gone now. His final breath had left his lips hours ago, his eyes open toward the ceiling as if still watching for something. She didn't have time to grieve. Outside, the forest was alive with movement. Branches snapped, earth trembled. The thing her uncle had once called Max was hunting again. Clara loaded the rifle with shaking hands, her father's jacket still clinging to her shoulders like armor. On the table lay her father's old journal, pages she'd never seen before, filled with sketches of cages, symbols, and strange notes, sound triggers, memory commands. Not animal, not anymore. The last page stopped her cold. If it ever returns, don't fight it with bullets. Remember who it was before. She didn't understand, until she flipped the page and saw a drawing of her father and Elias's boys, standing beside a young bear cub. The caption read, "Found him near Alder Creek. We called him Max." Her father had raised the bear, before Elias turned it into something else. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the forest through the window, and for the briefest second, she saw it standing there, still, massive, eyes glowing faintly in the rain. Watching her, waiting. Clara's breath caught. She stepped away from the window, heart pounding so hard she thought her ribs might crack. She needed to end this. Tonight. She grabbed the kerosene can from the shed, then headed into the woods with the rifle slung across her back. The mud sucked at her boots, trees closing around her like prison bars. Every step forward was answered by a sound behind her, branches cracking, the slow drag of a chain against wet leaves. She didn't turn back. When she reached the clearing, the air felt heavier, like the earth itself was holding its breath. In the center stood the remains of an old cage, twisted metal half buried in roots. Elias's den. Torn bits of chain hung from the frame, glinting in the lightning. The ground was littered with bones, animal, human, she couldn't tell. The smell of rot and rust filled the air. And then came the sound she'd been dreading. A low growl close too close. The trees shuddered as the massive shape emerged. Mud clung to its fur, rain streaming down its scarred face. Chains still hung from its neck like broken jewelry, and in its eyes burned a fury so old it seemed almost human. Clara raised the rifle, but her hands shook violently. Max, she whispered, the name trembling off her tongue. The bear froze. For a long, terrible moment, they just stared at each other, the woman and the creature shaped by her family's sins. The forest around them fell completely silent. Then she did something she didn't fully understand. She lowered the gun. I know what they did to you, she said, voice trembling but steady. My uncle, my father, they hurt you. But he tried to fix it. He tried to save you. I saw his notes. He never forgot. The bear huffed, head lowering slightly. Mud dripped from its jaw like blood. It took one slow step forward, then another, circling her as if unsure whether she was threat or ghost. I'm not them, Clara whispered. You remember me, don't you? You saw me as a child. He kept your picture in his desk. A sharp crack of thunder shattered the moment. The bear roared, deafening and wild, lunging forward. Clara dropped the rifle and fell back, rolling through the mud. Her hand hit the kerosene can and instinct took over. She yanked the cap off and poured it over the old cage, the smell stinging her nose. When the bear turned again, she struck a match. Flame exploded upward. The fire spread fast, crawling across the rusted cage, devouring the chains. The bear bellowed, stepping back, eyes reflecting the inferno. For a second, Clara thought she saw confusion, fear even, and then something else. Recognition. She stepped closer to the flames. It's over, Max. No more cages. No more pain. The bear's chest heaved, its massive shoulders trembling. The wind carried the firelight across its face, revealing old scars, some deep, some healed, all carved by human cruelty. It looked at her, and the rage in its eyes faded, replaced by something heartbreakingly soft. Regret. Then, slowly, it turned and began to walk away, toward the trees, toward freedom. But just as Clara exhaled, a shot rang out. The sound ripped through the clearing. The bear staggered, letting out a strangled cry. Clara spun around. Sheriff Harlow stood at the edge of the woods, rifle smoking. Get back, Clara, he shouted. That thing's killed enough. No, she screamed, running forward. You don't understand. The bear collapsed, blood mixing with rain and ash. Clara dropped to her knees beside it, tears blurring her vision. I'm sorry, she whispered, pressing her hand against its fur. I'm so sorry. The creature's breath came shallow now. For one last moment, it lifted its head and looked at her, truly looked at her, with eyes no wild beast should have. And in them, she saw forgiveness. Then it was still. The rain came harder, smothering the flames, turning the clearing into a mirror of mud and smoke. The sheriff approached slowly, lowering his weapon when he saw her trembling beside the fallen giant. What was that thing? He murmured. Clara wiped her face, voice breaking. Something we created and never deserved. The bear's eyes remained open, catching the faint light of dawn. For a heartbeat, Clara swore they glimmered, not with rage, but with peace. The forest, once howling with chaos, now stood utterly still, as though mourning its lost child. Weeks passed before Clara could bring herself to enter the woods again. The storm had stripped the trees bare, scattering branches and secrets across the ground. The old cage was nothing but twisted metal now, half swallowed by the earth. Nature had already begun to reclaim what humans had corrupted. The townspeople spoke in hushed tones about that night, about the girl who survived the monster in the forest. Some called her brave. Others said she'd lost her mind, talking about forgiveness as if it were something beasts could understand. But Clara didn't argue. They hadn't looked into those eyes. They hadn't seen what she had. In the quiet hours before dawn, she reopened her father's butcher shop. The closed for good sign came down, replaced by one that read, Monroe's, honest meats, honest hearts. She worked the counter the way he used to, smiling, giving extra to those who couldn't afford it, speaking softly to every child that entered. The warmth returned, little by little, and for the first time since the nightmare began, Clara felt the town breathe again. Behind the shop, where her father once grew herbs, she planted a young oak. Beneath it, a small plaque read, For Daniel, who chose kindness. For Max, who found peace. Sometimes, when dusk painted the forest gold, Clara would hear the faint rustle of branches, the rhythm of something large moving gently through the trees. Not hunting, not haunting, just watching. She liked to believe it was him, the spirit of what once was, guarding the town he'd once terrified. A reminder that even the darkest creatures can carry light inside them, if someone, somewhere, remembers their pain. And though Alder Creek would never forget the night of the storm, they would tell the story differently with each generation. Some spoke of vengeance, others of forgiveness. But Clara always said it was about understanding, that even monsters are made, not born. Because sometimes the wildest hearts are not the ones trapped behind bars, but the ones who break them and walk, finally free, into the dawn.